everyone, and welcome back to Talking Mental Health. I'm here with Eliot today. Eliot is one of our Studio Wesley interns. Eliot, do you want to give a little introduction to who you are?
Yeah, so my name's Elliot. I'm currently a freshman at Jacksonville University. My major is business administration and international business, and I'm excited to talk about our topics today, which is failure, right?
Yeah, and so this is Elliot's first episode with us. I think after today, you have seen all of our new interns' faces throughout all these episodes. I think he's the last one to make it on here. We are doing failure today, so this is part two. Part one is in season one with Yvette. Yvette is a licensed mental health counselor, and she's also a teacher at Advent Health University in Orlando, Florida. This is by far in my top episodes. I loved the conversation that Yvette and I had. I think it's super relatable. She gets really down to earth. She gives real life stories. And I think it's something that every college student experiences at some point in time. So I think it was a really important topic to cover. So, Elliot, if you're ready, we'll go ahead and just jump right in.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Yeah, so I'll let you start. What's something that resonated with you, stuck out with you, something she said that you wanted to comment on, any or all of the above?
So, first of all, I just want to say I'm so glad that we're talking about this topic because I know in my life, in my life personally, I've had a lot of experience with failure.
Mhm.
One of the things that stuck out to me the most is she said strong enough to fail. Like you have to be strong enough to fail. And that was
Yeah.
big for me because I was like, yeah, that's like crazy. Because I think I wrote down the definition that she gave. Excuse me. When we don't perform in the way we hope is what like she defined as like failure. Like when we don't perform in the way we hope. So it's like you have to be strong enough to be able to not perform the way you wanted to, which is like
Hmm.
fine. Like, and I also think the important part is like a lot of people like will just I remember she talked about like not even wanting to do the thing that you might fail at. Like you're literally so scared and so like fearful of the failure that you don't ever do what it is that you were going to do in the first place. And that's like you have to be strong enough to be able to like have the option of failing to actually do it because the truth is like without failure you can never like win, like
Hmm.
if you think about it, like failure like failure is the first step in winning. So it's like a lot of people fail like hundreds and thousands of times before they even like do something successful. So that's what stuck out to me the most.
Yeah, and I love how you just kind of tied a few different parts of her conversation together. And also, I just love that that's where we're starting because that was one of the moments that hit me the most too, was when she was talking about how, and I think she was talking about a personal story where she took weightlifting classes and
Right,
she
yeah.
had failed to follow through on one of the lifts she was doing, and some person in the gym came up and they were like, "You got this, you can do it," and they helped her do it. Um, but then she talked to her trainer afterwards, and her trainer was like, "I needed you to be strong enough to fail before I could let you fail." So like previously she'd given her lower weights and stuff so she wouldn't fail. So it's a whole thing. But that was like one of the most powerful points I think in this episode for me as well, is like um you have to have that fail to grow, but also
Hmm.
like failing just meant you were strong enough to fail, and I think that that was a beautiful kind of way to put it. And then also I love that you tied it into the failures when we don't perform in the way that we had hoped or expected. Because I
Hmm.
asked at the beginning of all these episodes, I was like, let's define this. Let's take this topic we're talking about and let's define what it means. And so when I said, can we define failure? She was like, it's very subjective. It's very dependent on who you are, what you're doing, what you're going through, the time, the place, the person. Um, and so I love that aspect of like, it's when you, specifically me, you, whoever it is, don't perform in the way that you had hoped you would, because it's so
Hmm.
specific to yourself and who you are as a person. And it ties into that. Another thing you said, you like marked a bunch of boxes on my list. It ties into like this next, I think third thing you said, but also last thing you said, not in that order, um, of like how it can stop us from doing things. And I think that is where it relates to a college student the most. It's like our example of
Hmm.
like,
Right.
you don't raise your hand on a class and speak because you're afraid of what you're going to say isn't going to sound right, or it's going to make you sound like you don't know the information. So
Hmm.
I think that's the part that like as a college student or now before wherever you are in that path, I think that like that is so relatable because how many times like has a professor asked a question and you're like, Man, I know I read that page, but I just don't remember it. And I don't want to answer it
Yeah.
because, what if the professor thinks differently of me because I answered it incorrectly?
Mm.
Yeah, all the things. There was so much there. I appreciate that that's kind of how you went with it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I actually had another thing she said. I forget when this was in the episode, but she talked about like the story that we tell ourselves. I feel like I
Yes.
wrote that down. And it's like similar, like when I think about that, the story we tell ourselves, like that, like almost reminds me of like mindset. Like I'm a big like mindset person, like having a good mindset and like not like the same mindset, like different mindsets for like different things that you're doing. So like for example, when you're about to play in like a game of like I don't know, like football or basketball, like if you're a sports player or something like that, you want to be like super focused and you want to be super competitive, but like vice versa, if you're say like focusing on a test or something like that, or you're going to like talk with someone about something important, you're obviously not going to want to be like hyped up about like about that, because that'll like raise like anxiety and nervousness about something that really it shouldn't be nervous for. So like the story we tell ourselves is similar to like what we tell ourselves has an impact on how we can how the scenario can happen, like how we can go into doing the things that we do in our lives. So it's like I wrote a word for it. It's like I'm thinking of, it's on the tip of my tongue. Like what's it called when you write personal affirmations? That's what it
Mm,
is. It's
yeah.
like personal affirmations. Like if you can say that you can do it, then you can do it, right? So it's like I feel
Yeah.
like that was super cool. That was one of the things that I thought was interesting for sure.
Yeah, that's another one that I wrote down too because I'm very big on stories and people's stories and hearing people's stories. And
Hmm.
I think there are so many things we can pull from this part of the conversation with Yvette. I mean, just for one, like you can learn so much about a person from the way they talk about themselves,
Hmm.
Do they start when you say, you know, hi, I'm so and so. How are you? Good, good, good. What do you do? Do they identify with their job first? Do they identify with something in their personal life that they love to do? How does somebody
Hmm.
identify themselves? What do they talk about first? And then it also goes into like that negative self talk. Um, you can learn so much about
Right.
like
Yeah.
perception of themselves by the way they talk about themselves. And I know that like it's also a thing
Hmm.
for college students, college aging adults, people in their 20s to, and I do it all the time with that like self-deprecating humor where you're like, I'm not thriving, but I'm surviving, like just casually, you're like, things
Yeah.
aren't great, but I'm
Uh-huh.
gonna make a joke about it. But even that, it says so much
Right. Those things
about
have
what's
an
going on.
impact.
Yeah, yeah. And so I loved that line of like, I wrote it down
Hmm.
too, and I was going to try to read it again. Where did it go? The impact of the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. Um,
Hmm.
just because, if, like you said, if you're constantly, and Yvette said, if you're constantly in that narrative of like, I am a failure, then you're
Hmm.
constantly going to feel like a failure. And I think that she talked about changing the narrative, which is, where you're going with like the self affirmations and things like that, which can be
Hmm.
so helpful. Just like that addition of, maybe it sounds silly to some people. Maybe you look in your mirror every morning and you say three nice things about yourself. And as silly as that might
Hmm.
be in the moment, it's changing your narrative. It's changing it from I'm a failure to I failed at this thing yesterday, but I'm going to try again today. Like it has that like totally different language behind it and it changes things so much. So
Hmm.
I also love that. There's a TED Talk and I cannot remember who gave the TED Talk and it's driving me crazy because it's all I can think about when you said it is there's a TED Talk about the stories we tell ourselves and I have to find it. And if I find it, I can put it with this video, but it's such a good TED Talk and it talks about all the same things of like, you know, what we tell ourselves is how we're going to feel about ourselves. And so if we're using
Hmm.
negative talk instead of positive, that's how we're going to feel. And so it goes into failure and ties into all the things. Yes. Yeah. All the
Going
things.
back to like the mindset thing too, like I feel like even like you can get like super insecure about your failures too, like
Mhm.
especially like past failures. Like I know for me the thing was like I used to have like anxiety about like future failures. Like even though it hadn't happened yet, I was always like what what would happen if I failed at this? Going back to like the even not doing something because you might fail. And I wrote down like something that I learned is like you have to like and this is just a mindset. Like this isn't obviously you're not gonna do this all the time, but sometimes you just have to not like care what other people think about you. Like that's like one of, and I truly believe that that's one of the biggest superpowers in the world, not caring what other people think about you. Like if you can truly have that sometimes, then like you'll be able to accomplish so many different things because you'll do things that other people won't because you'll be stronger, like it says, like strong enough to fail. You'll be stronger mentally to be able to, want to do those things and go for those opportunities.
Yeah, and I love that point in the beginning, of like it makes my brain think about this. So like when I was younger, I was bad. I don't even know how to describe it. I was bad at being good at math, or I had this like really secret ability to like look like I was good at math, but I was bad at math and ended up in all the hard math classes somehow.
I'm just bad at math. I can't try to be good at it.
Like I mean, I was never good at it, but somehow I ended up in these
Uh-huh.
classes, and it was a whole thing. But because I got my first C ever in middle school in the hard math class, from then on, like every single time I entered in a class, I was like, well, I'm not good at math. Like, why am I in
Hmm.
this class? I'm not good at math. I wouldn't raise my hand. I wouldn't ask questions because I knew if I asked a question, or I thought, not knew, I thought if I asked a question, that to the rest of the class, I was going to look like I didn't belong. Because that's how I felt.
Hmm.
I felt like I didn't belong. So I went into it with that mindset of like, I don't belong in this class. So I'm not going to make it obvious to anybody else that I don't belong here. And I think that kind of like goes into kind of what you were saying in the beginning. And I think that that's, like I said, it's so relatable to a college student because I think we're all in those moments where we're sitting in a class and in that moment, say we write a paper and it doesn't do as well as we thought it would or as we hoped it would, to go back to like her, we didn't perform the way we hoped, you know, maybe that's what stops you from raising your hand in that class. You got a bad grade in
Hmm.
a paper and you're like, man, I hoped I did better. And so you don't raise your hand because that might take away that sense of belonging there, which I think is
Hmm.
so real for so many people. I know I've been there, depending on the class and the time and part of the semester, depending on where I was. But that's just kind of where my brain went, is like those real life applications. But
Yeah, for sure.
I'm
I feel
trying to think.
like
Yeah, go for it.
something that like I know has like rung true in my life is this might be a little bit of a rant, but
Go
like
for it.
the things that you try to accomplish, right? We all have like goals that we try to accomplish and things that we try to do. And obviously those big goals, like there's a path that you take to reach that goal. Like it's not like a one and done kind of thing. And I've
Mhm.
learned to like enjoy the like journey of like getting to the goal more than the actual goal so that even if I do like fail per se, not I don't really like to call it that, but like if I don't get exactly what I'm looking for, or like when we don't perform the way that we hope. So when I don't get exactly what I want, right? When I don't get that, I won't be disappointed because I would have done all this work to get to that point. I can like look in the past as almost like a case study of, hey, I did this, so why can't I do it again and maybe get a different result? So I feel like a lot of times you can just look back on your own personal history and be like, if I'm able to do these things, why can't I do this thing and just go for it?
Yeah, and I think that ties into a little bit what she was talking about of like reframing failure. I feel like that's kind of what you just
Hmm.
did, of like,
Yeah.
um, you're not just looking at that goal, you're looking at the journey, which is our story as well. How did we get there? But you're seeing it as like there's this obstacle. How do I get over it? And I think that that's reframing it, which is kind of where I went with her when we start talking about like what do you do? What do you do when someone just thinks they're a failure and they can't pull themselves out of it? And that is such a big component of it. How do we reframe that? How do we change it from I am a failure to I failed at something, or I didn't do something well, or something didn't work out? And so I think that's a really neat perspective, like for you to have going into that, because I think that's
Hmm.
exactly what that is that reframing subject. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I want
And
to touch a
even
little
speaking
bit.
of like,
Oh,
oh,
sorry, go
okay.
again.
I was just gonna say, even speaking of reframing, like I don't like to think of it like as like why did I fail at this? I like to look at it as like what did I learn from this? Because like
Yeah.
a lot of times, like when you go through something, right? Like life is all of a constant like learning. Like the moment you stop learning, the moment you like there's no everyone's a teacher and everyone's a learner. There's no one's just a teacher and no one's just a learner. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
so if you go through something, you have to like look back on it and be like, okay, what did I learn from this? How can I take this and go ahead and learn something about my future in this way and learn more about
Hmm.
myself through this?
Yeah, and I think that is like one of the most important ways to reframe something. Not why did I fail, but what did I learn?
Hmm.
Which I mean, when you say it out loud in this conversation, it can sound easy, but in the moment, for some people, can be so hard
For
to do.
sure.
But
Definitely.
it's one of those things where you have to practice, get in the habit of it.
Hmm.
Start small, get big, um, work on that mindset. I love that we've kind of brought mindset into this a little bit because I think that that's
Yeah.
not talked about a lot in these spaces of like how much of an impact a mindset towards yourself can have on you. Um, I
I like
like
to
that you
think of it
brought
like you can change your perception of the reality that you
Mhm.
choose to live in, you know?
Yeah,
Like you
and
don't
that's
have
exactly
to
what
keep
Yvette's
living
been
in your
saying.
own. Hmm.
Mhm. Yeah. I like that you brought in that aspect of like, this is what I do in the moment. So I want to talk a little bit about at the very end. I always brought up peer support in these conversations just because, and I said it in the video and I say it in every one of these too, to like reiterate it. But in college, some of our biggest supporters are our peers just because they're the closest person we have, depending on how far or how close we are to our family. You might only see them regularly and not our family. Depending on your relationship with your family, they might not be someone who's technically in your support circle. And so I always ask about peer support. And so I appreciated something that she said. So you were talking about a little bit about like, this is what I do, this is how I do it, this is what helps me. Um,
Hmm.
she when I brought up like what can a peer do in this situation, um, first she had this whole conversation about like, so many emotions and feelings are universal to everyone. They might look different, present different on the outside, but they are there. We all have those emotions and those feelings, but we tend to assume we are alone in them. And so sometimes one of the best things we can do is speak it out loud to a peer or anyone around us that can kind of help us open that door to universality to see that like we're not the only ones experiencing this. But
Hmm.
to sum all this up, to go like to my original point, one of the things she said is like when someone opens up to you about feeling like a failure, that approach it as like a, can I share what helped me? So instead of like just immediately being like, this is what helped me and like saying something, but like leaving that open to where they can say, no, I'm not feeling like that right now. No, I'm not ready to talk about it or
Hmm.
how I can fix it.
Yeah.
But like that window of like, can I share what helped me? So like if someone opens up to you, Elliot, and they're like,
Hmm.
this semester has really sucked. I'm feeling like a failure. I haven't been good at anything this semester. And like, instead of jumping in and being like, this is what I did, instead you're like, can I share something that helped me? And I thought that was really beautiful. It's like that
Hmm.
sentence because I think it's like it shows that you're present and you're there for that person, but it also doesn't push them to pursue or
For
speak
sure.
on more than they're ready to, I guess.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think like sometimes it's just like you have to have the courage to like be able to like speak up and like open yourself up, like a lot of
Mhm.
times we don't like opening ourselves up to like talk to people, and I understand that completely, but
Mhm.
sometimes it's what we have to do in order to grow, like sometimes it's just a vital step. I know
Mhm.
that's been true for me 100%. I
Yeah.
thought that I would, if I were to talk about, the things that I was going through in certain parts of my life, like I would have been looked down upon, but it actually helped me go through on some things. But of course, you have to have trust. Trust is an important part of that. You can't just open up to everybody. So
Yeah.
be safe with that, obviously. But that's
Yeah.
helped me for sure.
Yeah. I just thought that was really neat piece down in there. And I appreciated it because I think we want to jump so much to help people, especially people we're close to when they're in need, but that's not always what they need in that moment. They just need to listen or you to
Hmm.
listen. They just need you
Yeah,
to hear what they're saying. Say, I can help if you need me to, or do you want me to help? Try to help. Do you want something like, what do you need from me in the moment? But like, don't push anything. I think is so important to name. That is like all I have written down. So if you have other things you want to talk about, we can keep going. If not, we can close it out. Whatever
I
works
think
with
we
you.
covered all. I think we covered all my notes.
Yeah, that's why I was
Everything
just
I had
looking
to
through
talk
mine, and
about.
I think we've got everything that I have written down too. It kind of just organically goes. So We're going to go ahead and close it out then. So thank you, Eliot, for being here. Like I said, this was a
Thank you.
very enlightening episode for me the first time around, so I was excited to get to go through it again and kind of watch it and relive it, just to remind myself of all of these things. So if you guys haven't seen part 1, go back, watch it. I really suggest you do it. Yvette was amazing. I learned so much. So all the things. See you guys next time. Bye.